So this session is intended to give us some clear understanding of the nature of youth as an age group. It will take us from where they become youth, and then what motivates their behavior, and then we'll move the next session as to how to deal with them as we get to know what their nature is. At the expense of generalization, most youth are by and large going to act the same way in similar situations. Just the only difference you will see is based on their education, individual circumstances, but more or less the bulk of the description that we're giving here is quite universal amongst youth groups, okay? And I'm talking about teenagers, particularly between 13 and 19 and 20, 21, that young age. The first question that comes to mind is, my son an adult or a child? You know, by the time they reach 13, they are acting sometimes as children, sometimes as adults. And we parents get confused and get puzzled. You know, Asma, I'm leaving you with your siblings, take good care of them, and so on and so forth. And as soon as mom comes back, she will find that Asma has hit her young sister because she didn't listen, and has done this. Asma, I told you, don't touch them, don't you do this. Then Asma is puzzled. Am I the adult left with them to take care of them? And I do this like a mom, right? Or am I the baby that she's screaming at me? So that confusion is there. And it is because of that central question, that youth are not children, but they are not adults. They are somewhere in the middle. They are in a transition period, and their curve is moving towards adulthood, some faster than others. Some act more like adults under the supervision of adults that they respect. But they act like children when they are with children. Okay, that's natural, that's expected. But the central issue is for us adults to recognize the fact that they are neither full-blown adults, nor are they children. Some of them will linger in childhood habits for a long time, depending on how much maturity is kicking into their heads and their hearts based on their information. So they are acting sometimes as old children or young men and women, sometimes acting in innocence, sometimes in deliberation with intention, sometimes acting in ignorance, sometimes with full knowledge of what they are doing. Sometimes they act out of the desire to be independent, but sometimes they act very dependent. I cannot do it, I cannot do it. Why? You're a man, you say I'm my own man, but they can't do it. So sometimes they act out of obedience, and sometimes out of rebellious attitudes. Sometimes they act out of physical needs, and sometimes act motivated by grown-up needs, because they are developing part of both. Sometimes they are acting because the space they need, and I'm talking about the social space, is not enough for them. They need larger space. So between the two, you will find that children have needs, direction, and motivations that are different from adults. And youth get something from both sides, depending on the situation and the degree of their maturity and their ability to handle the situation, either as adults or as children or somewhere in the middle. Children act out of short-term thinking. They need something, they need it now, and they need it here, right? But adults are calculating. They look, you know, they say, you know what, I will do it. But then in 1 hour they come and say, you know what, remember I did this and I want that. But they don't tie it together. But they do it out of planning and long-term recognition of time. So these are some basic things that you need to look at as a parent. What falls under a child's behavior and why? What falls under an adult's behavior and why? Then we have to look at the youth nature. What constitutes a typical youth nature? What is the nature of youth? What should a natural youth be like? First, understanding self in relationship to the environment. That becomes a huge issue with the youth. They want their own space, they want to be their own free men and women, they want not to be second guessed, they want to do things their way. So let us look at some of those things. Their physical growth has an impact on both their thoughts and their understanding and their reception ability to take what you say for what it is. They always take things their way. They process information in a different way than the one you're delivering, the piece of information you have. Also, you will find that their mental growth also has an impact. Their ability, one time they take you for the angel you say you are, the infallible human being, the prophet-like dad or mom. But then as they grow older and discover you're missing on your prayer, you also get angry and you lose your temper. Okay? You're not also doing your assignment on time even in your job. They discover that everybody is really fallible, and they become rethinking of how innocent and sometimes stupid they were, taking us for the angels we once projected ourselves to be. And this discovery can shock some and can bring some awareness to others. It depends on how they react to this. The awareness of people, the environment, and the issues also becomes different. They are not now the guys that you can say, you know what, honey, if you pray and you do this, I will give you a piece of chocolate. You can't do that. You can't bribe, a teenager with something like this. So you have to think as to what kind of things that you can use for conditioning to get them to cooperate. It's not the children's stuff anymore. Also, they develop that independent will away from the father, away from the mother, that is their own. So now you're going to visit a family, a relative or neighbor. Then you used to pack everybody in the car and move. Now he's a teenager. I want to sit home. You can't sit by yourself. No, I can. Why can't I? Because I told you you have to come. I don't want to come. There's nobody my age in this family, right? And maybe it's only an excuse because they want that proof and assertion that I have my independent will. I can make my choice. That is part of growth and part of becoming his own man and her own woman. I'm not saying agree or disagree. I'm not discussing the details. I'm giving you the scenarios of situations to illustrate the issue, not to agree or disagree or to tell you what to do in every situation, because time will not allow us really to go over this in details. Also, the rapid emotional reaction. They think that every adult that comes at them is kind of like a wild animal. So you knock on the door and you open and suddenly he jumps off the bed. Why are you jumping? I'm coming to check on you. Oh, I'm okay, I'm okay. But they take your entrance as an adult as an intrusion into their private life. And they want independence. They value their independence, freedom, and seclusion more than they value anything else. So you can't buy this away or bribe them away from this. Also, they develop new interests. In the past you could sit 5 kids in one room and everybody, one is coloring, one is playing this, one is playing that. But now they have their own interests. You can't program their life for them. So if you want to organize something for them, they have to be incorporated. They have to be brought into discussion. They have to be able to express what they want, what they don't, what they like, what they don't. Otherwise, your plan will always fail. So you have to deal with them as adult-like as much as you can because of their new interest, new character, and new development. Also, they have a big thing with authority. Whether it is teachers, parents, the imam, the community leaders, they always have an issue with authority. Why? Because at young age, as children, authorities superseded everything. Mom said so, right? The teacher said so, right? But by the time they hit the teenage, I don't like it. It's a different type of personality, different type of attitude. So we have to recognize also that that is part of their growth. The recognition of self, the assertiveness of what I want, the independent thinking, all of those come to play. But also, as I said, when they discover the fallibility factor of how weak and vulnerable we also are, and they discover our shortcomings, they lose some trust in us. And that's natural. They lose some trust. They know that we are humans. We are all bound to make mistakes and stuff. Don't be disappointed that they know that, because that also becomes part of their learning experience. that they are not to shoot to become angels and keep disappointing themselves and others. We don't want our children to try to become angels. We want them to try to be humans, but good ones for that matter. Okay, so the lack of trust is a positive and negative factor. We can talk about this in discussion. Their desire for separation and seclusion is also part of establishing one's own space, social and environmental space, whereby you can have 4 kids in one room when they were young. Now everybody wants their own room, and they don't want it just to sleep. They want to sit in the room by themselves. When the whole family is taking dinner, come take dinner with us. I don't want to eat now. Why? Because. Where is the rest of the sentence? You know. So that whole thing is about what? It is about, if you don't know me by now, why should I answer you anyway? That's what it boils down to. So they give you those short answers. And what you need to get is, are you comfortable staying by yourself? Of course he is comfortable. He wants to be by himself. What do they do when they are by themselves? We'll talk about this at length, because that is an important element here to discuss. Challenging adults and all authorities is part of growing up. You know, when they were young and everything is yes, with or without a grudge, now they have the power to say no. They can say no, and you cannot drag them and move them where you want. They have the power to say no, but challenging authority is a very important element in their growth from childhood into adulthood. It's a big move for them. So when they challenge your authority, Daddy, what did you talk to your mom like this? You know, you tell me to respect my mom, why do you talk to your mom like this? It's a way of saying, I'm not seeing consistency, but they say it in their way. Okay? So you need to explain yourself. You need to humble yourself a little bit as a parent and be able to be vulnerable yet consistent. Vulnerable means that you accept your weaknesses and take responsibility for your shortcomings. For example, to tell them, it was wrong for me to do it, and I hope you don't end up doing this to your mom. That is responsibility. Okay? So challenging adults and all authorities is part of their growth. Challenging established values, norms, and rules. Do you know what? I want to stay with my friends tonight. What do you mean stay with your friends? You've never slept outside the home. Oh yeah, but tonight I am. Why? What's special about tonight? Oh, my friends are all getting together, we're staying together and stuff. You as a parent have the choice to say yes or say no. But you have to balance, because everything in life is a trade-off between an interest that you are keen to keep and a relationship that you're trying to achieve. And we can talk about the balance between interests and relationships. There are models in management models that can tell you as a parent, when do you give more value to the relationship and when do you give more value for the interest that you want to keep. There are models to look into this. Also, it is good for them to challenge the values that you have established for them as children, because they are going to be challenged by their friends, by the environment. And by challenging you, most of the time they are seeking answers to take to their environment. It's not that they hate what you're doing or they hate what you're instructing them to do. It is that they don't know why, because at young age they were neither able to discuss nor were they given information as to why they are doing what they are doing. Rejecting criticism. Criticism is like fire for youth. You start on the note of criticism and you really ignite fire in their heart and soul, and they become crazy. Why? Because for them, my decision, my attitude, my behavior is part of me. They are unable to separate themselves from their opinion. So when you discover that they are wrong in their opinion, instead of destroying their person to criticize the opinion, separate the opinion first. For example, but why can't I date? You know, everybody's dating. You know, and this is, after all, is a Muslim girl, and her family knows it. Okay, why don't I date her? She accepts it, they accept it, and everything is fine. Well, this is not about you. This is the way it's separate. This is not about you. This is about the principle itself. Would you like somebody to do this with your sister? Would you like your sister to stay out with somebody that the family is uncomfortable with in a context that is unacceptable? That's, again, it's away from his person. But if you take the discussion in the direction of, if you do this, you're not my son, then you broke everything. There is nothing for him to keep. Okay? So you have to always keep that connection and value the relationship, but at the same time establish the principle so that you get the discussion where it should be. Reactionary and uncomfortable, that's what youth is. They react very quickly and they are very uncomfortable where they feel that they are not accepted, embraced, and involved in the circle where they are. That's why youth love to be with youth. They want to be with each other because they can relate to each other much more than they can relate with their younger sibling if you want to leave them home, or with you and your friends if you want to get them to sit with you and stay with you. And that's why I was talking in the lunchtime with our brothers here about the idea of establishing Muslim youth centers, because our mosques and our Islamic schools are unable, I believe, to attract youth or be youth friendly because of the rules, the structure, the way they are run and the way they are managed. But if you establish one single Muslim youth center somewhere in the country, other places will copy you very soon. Even if it is a small house where they can come, they can play things, they can have exercise room, they can have a small lecture room that can turn into a prayer hall as well. They can invite their friends and spend hours together, and you can have an imam to come and give them lectures. You can have a physician to come and talk to them about lifestyle, its influence and impact on their future, things of this sort. Youth love to be with each other. So instead of picking them individually and putting them with adults where they don't belong, you send knowledge and information to their own gathering in their own place. Okay. Also, youth love to develop their own authority over others. They love it when you tell them, you are the Amir, and everybody here will have to listen. Let us see how you manage your siblings. They love to be the boss. And that is an exercise of adulthood. That's a show of how, they want to become like a father and a mother and so on and so forth. So give them chances to do that. What are the basic motives for youth behavior and attitudes? Those can explain to us why youth do things the way they do. The biggest motive for the youth is the emotional vacuum. See, when they were young, you used to fill this vacuum by hugging them and kissing them and playing with them. But as they grow a little bit older, you can't always hug your teenage young men and women and do that. So you have to look for another means of keeping that emotion fulfillment running for them. You have to replace the kisses and the hugs and the chocolate and the lollipops with something that is meaningful for them, like words of appreciation, okay? Thanking them for their efforts. Good rewards that are relative to their age for their achievements, okay? A nice discussion when they do something wrong, instead of rebuke and reprimand as you do young children. So we have to adjust our style of managing their life in a way that responds to their needs and corresponds to their age. Also, despite the fact that they claim they know everything, definitely one of the biggest motives for their behavior is a lack of vision. They don't know where the future is. They sometimes see the future but just far away, and sometimes they look at the future through the eyes of the past and they become depressed, especially if they had lots of failings in the past. They were bad in math, they were bad in reading, they were having difficulty in this or that. Then they look back and say, how can I make it through the college? How can I make it to become this? So they have that lack of vision. They don't know where to go with whatever skills they developed so far. The desire for acceptance, which is in the roots of conformity, peer pressure, okay? It is all about being accepted. And the way I always advise the youth is to tell them, when somebody pushes you and pushes you hard, what happens if you don't push back? You fall, right? You fall. But if you start pushing back, you apply pressure where you can keep yourself standing. That is standing on your principles. But if you accept everybody's invitation or everybody's pressure, then you're always out of balance. Okay? And that happens a lot with the youth. Rushing results. They want things, like children. They want it now. Dad, I need a car. And they think that the car should have come yesterday anyway. So when he says, I need it, he has been so patient. He didn't ask for it for 2 years. So when he comes and says it, they consider themselves, I humiliated myself asking for it, and you're not even giving it to me? So it's always that they need whatever they need. They need it here and now and immediately. But they live also in a lot of confusion. We will also talk a lot about the sources and reasons for confusion. Part of it, we spoke about it. Their confusion about whether they are young children or grown-up adults. And that we discussed in the beginning of this presentation. But the fear factor is an overwhelming factor in their life. Youth are afraid. We'll talk about fear reasons and factors in the next few screens very quickly. But they are afraid of failure. They are afraid of rejection. They are afraid of authority. And they are also afraid of responsibility. There is a lot of reasons for them to be afraid, but they don't say it. And you don't see it. And this is why many of the youth do not talk to us. They never want to be vulnerable. They never want to look weak or needy, because their exhibition of adulthood and the induction to adulthood is to be strong, to be macho. I'm independent. I can do it my way. You know what? Even if I failed, I will keep trying until I did it before Dad knows that I failed 3 times. But I will show him the final transcript anyway. Let's talk about the youth confusion and fear. What is the underlying reasons for that fear and confusion? Number one, they are confused between the issue of being grown up, how to handle myself in terms of sex education, my relationship with the other gender, and sexual responsibility. They are also confused between their own social life and their desire for privacy to reflect and ponder and resolve issues that goes through their head. Also, they are confused between respecting adults, something required of them every time, and being independent, which results in challenging authority, defying orders sometimes to prove that I am assertive and I'm a grown-up. They are also confused between dialogue, and you must have heard this from your teenage a lot of time, and argument. Don't argue with me. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying my opinion. So you need to explain what is the difference between an argument and a discussion, and instead of just blaming them for being argumentative. Following rules and discovering the world. This is the age of trying everything, taking risks, adventure, okay? But you parents expect them to comply and be safe and be cautious and be this, and you imply that they will act like adults. They can't act like adults and learn at the same time. Okay, they are also confused between their own concept of freedom and what is imposed on them of limits. How could they reconcile this on their own? They have to understand, and we parents have to sit down and explain to them what is the benefit of limits, restrictions, which are not intended to limit them, it's intended to protect them against the potential harm that may befall them. They are also confused between Islamic values and personal desires. You know what? I want to do that, but it's haram. So how can I do it and not commit a sin? Or how do I avoid committing a sin but get what I want? They need also to know and learn openly that everything that Allah has made prohibited, He substituted for it something halal that will come on time. It will come in due time for everybody. They are also confused between their desire for change and their own process of changing from childhood to youth to adulthood, and stability. They value stability very much, but they love to take risks and get adventures and discover everything else. So these are some of the reasons, and the reasons continue still. They are also confused between adults' claims of infallibility and perfection. I want to have the perfect child, the straight A, the one who memorizes the whole Quran, and even Bukhari and Muslim if possible. And adults as humans. If you look at yourself when you were their age, you will appreciate the struggle they are putting and the achievements they are making, and recognize the changes that they are going through. They are also struggling between education and certification. What does math have to do with my life? You know, some kids ask, you know, what do I use geography with? You know, and neither parents nor teachers are taking the time to explain the practical value of what they are teaching. And this is a challenge for Muslim schools and for teachers to come forward and explain what is the value of chemistry for somebody who wants to work as a truck driver. You know, what is the value of math for someone who just wants to work as a clerk or nurse? You have to bring something to bear to make sense to them. Challenging adults is something that is part of their growth, but also developing my space is something very desirable. Between the desire for controlling the results and the situation and what happens next, and the desire to be independent, to act on my own without taking a huge fallback as a result. Proving myself and personal failure, how to balance between the two. How can I prove myself without failing, and how can I ensure success while I am trying to take a risk and get something done new that I have never done before. Finally, we are struggling with our youth on all fronts just because of this upcoming list. What we want for our youth as parents and what they want for themselves. And this is a huge list that can go on for hours, but just I made a brief one for you here. Our desire for control contravenes their desire for freedom. Our desire for their total submission to our authority contravenes their desire for independence. Our desire for absolute obedience is also contrary to their desire for convincing reasons as to why they have to do what we tell them to do. Our desire for ensured, secured results. We want to make sure that you're not going to have an accident. I want to make sure that you're not going to get an F. I want to make sure that your friends are not going to suck you into problems. I want to ensure all the results. And their desire for adventure, taking risks, and developing new skills. Desire for total discipline that we request of our children, and their desire for a space for themselves. Our desire for total accountability. I want to make sure that you report to me about everything you do or not do, and their desire for some tolerance, that they are not held to an angelic, unreasonable, untenable standards. Our desire for immediate compliance. I want you to do it, and when I say it, I want it done and finished. And their desire to have time to grow and mature. These are some of the basic issues that relate to youth as an age group. And I hope that by going through the list, which I did very quickly for the sake of time, you have developed some sense of what it takes to mature, nurture, and grow my child from a young child who's very completely submissive and obedient to an independent young man who can make decisions, who can take risks without, necessarily failing under your guidance, who can have some independence but also respect adults and relate to them in the appropriate way. Balancing all of this together is what this is about. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair.
It's overlapping.
Yes, they overlap because you can't really separate one from the other. I'm challenging the adults to establish my independent, assertive will of myself. And I am trying to get myself space which will give me independence, right? And to stay away from adults. I'm secluding myself to reflect and ponder on things on my own. I'm not joining adults in everything they want me to join because I want to be my own man. They all interfere and overlap. That's part of talking about any human traits or activities. They tend to overlap.
Does it also perhaps reflect their confusion? Sometimes they want something.
It plays into their confusion. It plays into their fear of openness. As I said, they become very scared to be vulnerable because we adults have sharp tongues when it comes to criticizing our children. Okay? And we don't have enough vocabulary to encourage and support and express compassion and empathy and so on and so forth. They are afraid of us. Yes.
I guess it's difficult to address solutions to every situation with the children at different ages and age groups. So where can we read up on this, or what can we, how can we follow up? Have you got any books that you've written, any things we can?
You will get the answer to this question the next session. Because the next session talks about how to deal with the youth. Considering all of these factors, I've developed about 30 bullet points that take you from the beginning to the end, how to deal with youth at your home in varieties of situations.
Besides that, is there anything we can...
I have not written books, no. Every time I do this workshop, yeah? Inshallah. Maybe on my way back. Inshallah. I have 24 hours, yes.
Yes, I would just like to thank you, brother, for the presentations. I just want to highlight that the Muslim Youth Association that you have talked about, because my background is from Bahrain, and we have also progressed something similar, Muslim Youth Association, which has about 6 places or 6 different places throughout Bahrain, about for 2,000 people. So it started from about 20 only. So I want to address that this idea could be taken by FAMC and applied here, because it does not need a lot of money.
Right.
But when you do it at the beginning, you will get a lot of people coming to you.
Right.
In Sydney, we have probably 3 youth centers already established, but we need more, inshallah. So there's a lot more work that can be done. Any other questions? The ladies have any questions? No questions. Everything clear, inshallah?
They are tired after lunch. They are tired. Do you want to get some tea and coffee for 5 minutes? You okay?
Okay, you can ask questions related to the previous presentations as well, because we didn't have a chance to have enough questions and answers to the previous 2 presentations.
You mentioned something about schooling, the nature of police, as well as if you can elaborate on decent schooling and the education system. Mention that in your
Yeah. What I mean here is, the closer the school becomes to the home value and the home system of discipline, the more supportive the school becomes to the home nurturing and process of raising children. So what I mean by decent school is a school that stands in support of the home values, because one of the biggest challenges that we as parents always face is the challenge of having our children measure the world with our own yardstick. I'll give you an example. 2 kids come home, and one of them says, "Mom," and I think I heard that question sometime today from somebody. "Mom," no, it was on the radio yesterday. Anyway, she says, "Mom, Do you know what? I go to the Muslim school and they are all Muslim kids and stuff, but you know what? They don't pray really 5 times a day. Okay? Why do we pray 5 times a day? And the other kid that comes and says, she's in the same setting, and she comes and says, Mom, you know, we pray 5 times a day, but why aren't the rest of the kids in my school praying 5 times a day? The 2 kids are asking the same exact question, but one of them, the first one is asking, challenging the home, why burden me with a 5-time daily prayer regimen, right? When other kids have the freedom to pray when they will, right? The other kid is saying, you know, the other kids are at fault. We pray 5 times a day, which we should. Why aren't they praying when they should? So carrying the home-based values and the home yardstick as my measurement of what is right and what is wrong is a sign of success for the home. When the school becomes reflective of the same values and supportive of the home, that doesn't create any conflict. This is what I mean by a decent school. A school, even an Islamic school, that works with the home to nurture one direction for the kids. And this can only happen when all the parent body is involved in the school development process. Not only a few parents, not only a few board members. So, but also a decent school is a school, the minimum of which is it does not contravene what I'm doing at home. So I say this is haram, they say this is very good, right? When I say you cannot do this, then they say you must do that. That becomes contravention. So what I meant is there's a minimum that the school shouldn't be fighting the home, but better yet if the school is supportive of the home value. Does this answer the question?
Yes, so if the school, the Islamic school, as well as the state school, does not meet the parents' expectations, what alternatives are there for the parent?
It's not about alternative. You may want to ask what should the parents do, because not everything can be solved by alternative stuff. We don't have so many alternatives as a minority here anyway. So what the parents should be doing is to get engaged, to engage the school in discussion, to engage the parent in the school in discussion, to drive their values into the school system, and to attend occasions, to volunteer in the school, to be part of the teacher aid system, so that you get aware, first-hand information as to what is going on. You get the chance to have a say with the principal. You get a chance to have a say with the PE teacher. You get a chance to join them in a field trip, and thus influence what goes on in your own child's life. So you become partner instead of staying out and looking for another place to escape from where you are. So I believe that parent engagement is the key to the whole process, whether it is an Islamic school or a public school.
What about the situation where a Muslim school does not encourage or support parent engagement? And in fact, where they start labeling those particular parents as troublemakers?
I cannot
Parents
speak.
are proactive and...
For me, this is a vague presentation. I'm sorry. This is a vague presentation, and I can't presume that this will tell me enough information to talk either about the school or the parent, because it really focuses and depends on the style of communication between the parent and the school. Parents should have a lot of power, and especially in community supported schools. Parents should have a lot of power and say in what goes on in the school. And if this structure doesn't exist, parents have to fight to bring about that structure. Yes.
What about the parents itself?
One parent wants one way and the other parent wants the other way. Then the school wins. Whenever there is a conflict, the third party wins. So parents have to sit down and be rational and say, let us agree that there is a minimum that everybody should agree to. What is this minimum? Then we say children shouldn't be allowed to use foul language in the school premises. Children should not be allowed to curse each other. Children should not be allowed to cross certain limits. This is at least a decent limit that everybody should agree to. I'm just throwing an example. But when it comes to higher values, like how much committed a child could be, or how much Quran would a child memorize, or this is individual family activity. This has nothing to do with the school. The school is not made to meet individual expectations of parents, but collective expectations of parents. So parents have to sit down in the PTA or PTO, whatever you call it, and develop those expectations from the school and relate them to the administration and demand that those expectations are met. But if parents disagree, the school wins always, and the kids lose.
How about if it was at home? Was at looking at the same thing in different ways?
That would reflect on something different. That is the parental policy in raising kids. This is an issue that I wanted to bring to your attention, but we're talking very fast for the sake of time. Every two parents at home must develop three things. Number one, a joint idea of what their children really are. You know, you say, for example, no, you misunderstand him. He didn't mean this, he meant that. How could the mother know what the father doesn't? How could she be the interpreter for the child? Is it because she lives with him longer? Is it because she is more empathetic and sympathetic to his situation? Is it because her perception is if the father gets his way, he will be too harsh on the child and she wants to protect the child? These are all reasons for why mothers and fathers talk differently about kids. So number one, they have to see the kids with the same eye. They have to agree. This child of mine, yes, he is this, he is that, he is not this, he is not that. Then you develop the profile, what I call the child's profile, which is unique to every child. This is number one. Number two, they have to jointly develop a program of development to say, this is what we need to target with this child. He lacks reading, and he is bad in math. Last year he graded poorly on math and stuff. And he also is not as polite as he should with his teachers. So these are three weaknesses that we want to focus on that particular child. As far as the girl, she is weak in this, she's strong in that. So you develop a program of development for each child. Then the third issue is a joint policy of both discipline and punishment. A joint policy, so that whenever something happens, they see it eye to eye, they know whether it is within the program or outside the program, and they know how to address it jointly. This whole joint idea is not there in many homes. I believe in most of our homes, parents do not see things eye to eye because we don't sit down to discuss, and when we sit, we argue, we want to convince one another, we don't want to see things from the other person's perspective. And this is what we need to do.
Any other questions?
Yes.
When a child has been brought up in an Islamic school and then it comes that they enter university, secular university, they become challenged to the full exposure of the whims of Western civilization. Like, what does one do in that situation to support?
The question assumes one assumption that I disagree with, that living through and growing up in an Islamic school doesn't expose you to secular values. It does. Islamic schools are not necessarily, quote unquote, a pure religious institutions. They are also secular institutions. They discuss civics, right? They discuss politics, they discuss geography, they discuss history, they discuss current events. So they are not totally, quote unquote, excluded from what's going on in the world. Second, kids also watch TV. So how could you call them isolated from society? They will watch TV, whether you like it or not, right? I'm not saying give in to that, but I'm saying they watch TV. I let my kids watch TV, but they watch the news, documentaries, and specific programs that can help them grow and understand the world around them, okay? Not only that, they also have friends in the Islamic schools who are not, quote unquote, as religious as themselves. So rest assured, they are really exposed to all varieties of people, and when they get to the college, we've seen them. They are the most active kids in the MSA, in FAMSI, are the ones who come from Islamic schools. I don't know if this is true or not in Australia, but in the United States, the most active kids in MSA and the most efficient ones are the ones who come from Islamic schools. Why? They have clear perception of their identity. They have some direction as to where they want to go, and they can tell the difference between living as a Muslim and being left out in the open without any identity or central issue in your life. So they have a sense of mission and a sense of direction, much better than ones who grew up in the general grazing area of the public school. Okay, yes, yes.
In your opinion, what is the disadvantage of home-educating kids?
What is the disadvantage of?
Sending your children to an institution to be educated, but
To homeschool them?
what would the disadvantage be, in particular the social disadvantage for your child?
In homeschooling? I have seen and I have known children who have done their PhD, who grew up from homeschooling. And they have done their PhD. They are very successful. They are very good. But those are individual cases. I do not know of a study that would document anything but that there is a social disadvantage for kids who study at homeschooling, especially if they are not accorded a chance to interact with other kids and to go out in the open, to have field trips like other kids, and to go and get exposed to the society. There are studies to prove that there is a social disadvantage, okay? But only if those factors are not included and incorporated in the program. If they are, the studies do not show any negative impact on their social abilities and social skills.
What's at home schooling?
Homeschooling is when the parents do not send their kids to school, but they teach them at home. Most of the time they get 2 or 3 parents. One is good in this subject, the other is good in that subject, and they collaborate together and get 5, 6 kids, like a private tutoring.
It's legally unacceptable.
No, it's another option for the Muslim community.
Okay. Yes.
We just talk about the importance of teaching the Arabic language. I think you spoke about last one. You mentioned that
It was in one of the slides, the Arabic language.
Yes. The Arabic language and how important this is. You know that your trust and confidence in any piece of information depends on several things, but one major factor is the authenticity of the source and the completeness of what you get. Okay? So when you get anything, you want to check always, is it first-hand source or second-hand source? Right? Translation is always a second-hand source of information. Anything translated, it gets filtered in the process through the eyes and ears and perceptions of the translator and the interpreter. So the question for us and our kids is, do we want our children to get Islam from second-hand sources? That's the bottom line question. It is not about glorifying the Arabic language or the Arabs or anything like this. It is not even about Arabic being the language of paradise, because you use language here. When we get there, it's another situation. Okay? So people don't have to leave their Malay background to get into paradise. Malays also will get to paradise, inshallah. So what I'm saying is, you have to focus on what works here. And for them to be able to read the Quran, read interpretation, and read the fiqh, which is basically the primary sources are in Arabic. Anything else is a second-hand source. So the bottom line question for me is, do you want, and if you say, but what is wrong? This is the language they master. It's English. And the whole world speaks English today, right? That's okay, but if you do this, you are depriving their own children from getting to know Arabic altogether, maybe including the Quran. And this is what the West is counting on. They are counting on assimilation through depletion. It is not assimilation through voluntary acceptance or voluntary integration. They are talking about assimilation through depletion. The first generation will die, and the resources will go away, and the interest will fade away. And even if we teach our kids everything that we know, 100% of it, which is literally impossible, that you can teach your kids everything you know, right? They will only pick of it about 60 to 70% maximum. What will they retain, however, is not going to be 100% of what they receive. It will be much less. Now, take it to the second generation and the third generation, and assimilation becomes evident. So unless the first generation pays enough attention to what is central to keeping the religion, keeping the identity of people, keeping the knowledge. Do you know, we are very much bent in the West on getting an imam that speaks English, an imam that speaks this. We should be bent on an imam that is interested in teaching our kids full Islam with the language. That's what we should be interested in. But we are spending more time satisfying our own desires as adults, much more than addressing the needs of our children as far as education in particular and the language in specific. Okay, any?
Just, can you refer to the aspects of education like law and finance as secular? When you said that it's not all Islam. When
Yeah, I refer to what is going on in Islamic school.
Is that secular? Isn't that Islamic?
Well, what I was saying is they are not deprived of the secular aspect of education in Islamic schools. It is not.
What's the term? Is it secular? Like secular as opposed to Islamic?
Yes, yes. I am saying kids who graduate from Islamic schools are partially exposed to secular education as they are exposed to Islamic education.
I think what the brother is saying is that even that education itself would be considered Islamic in the comprehensive use of the word Islamic. If you're doing politics and geography and mathematics, and it's of benefit to the people, then that would be considered Islamic knowledge as well.
But this is theoretical. I was addressing the issue that the brother was saying, that if kids graduate from Islamic schools, they will be dysfunctional in the college, because the college by nature is un-Islamic, it's focused on secular teachings and stuff. And I was answering to him saying, they are not purely quote-unquote Islamic. That's what brought the issue in.